Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here on INC Live for a very special episode, the UFC 300 preview show. My name is Karl Bainbridge and I am joined by the man on the right hand side of my screen. He is the Bobby Heenan to my Gorilla Monsoon. He's my friend and yours. It's Joe Neal. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here. I'm very glad to be the Pat McAfee to your Michael Cole.
Are we talking? I was going to say post Vince Michael Cole because I can take that, but Michael Cole before then was a slog.
Worst. Oh yeah, him and he was probably one of the worst for a long time, but now he's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it just goes to show it gives us hope actually because let's be frank, I'm hopeless as a presenter. And you know what? Give it 24, 25 years. Eventually, I might start getting actually good at this.
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting for my second wind, in that regard as well. I'm hoping maybe I can turn it around. I think I'm in my TNA era Taz. I'm hoping I can turn it around and hit AEW era Taz soon.
Well, what about SmackDown era Taz? I did like him during then.
I liked him. I liked him a lot, mostly because he made fun of Michael Cole a lot.
You could tell that it's WrestleMania weekend with the amount of wrestling references.
Oh yeah, WrestleMania weekend. Night one happened last night. I only know about one match.
Yep. Pretty solid card. We'll see what happens with night two. I've got the feeling, that not many people are going to be watching this because everyone's going to be talking about WrestleMania instead.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Most likely.
Yep. Like TKO, they made a mistake booking these two major shows so close together.
I know. They booked us and WrestleMania in the same weekend. Come on.
Who needs Roman Reigns when you got Joe Neal? He's the true tribal chief.
Yeah, acknowledge me. I'm the real Joe,
Because that's actually his name, isn't it?
Yeah. Because everyone made the joke when he came out at number 30, the year Randy won the Rumble. And it was we want Samoa Joe. And he goes, how about a Samoan named Joe?
Yeah. We are actually here to talk about mixed martial arts, so please don't turn away, because it certainly helps with the views. We are here to talk about one of the biggest and most important events for a long, long time in the world of mixed martial arts, UFC 300. So it's going to be the third landmark show that the UFC have done, obviously 100 and 200. And I thought before we actually get onto the show itself, I think it might be a good time to talk about the state of the UFC since 200. Obviously, that was a big landmark show, did over 1 million pay-per-view buys. What do you think, in your opinion, has changed the most about the UFC in those 8 years? Do you like it more or less as a business? Do you think the fight quality has got better? What are the sort of tropes and sort of techniques that you sort of feel have sort of infiltrated the sport since then?
One of the big techniques that's infiltrated the sport is the calf kick. That's one of the biggest ones. It's become huge. It's become the meta, you could say, of MMA. There is the other thing that really sticks out to me is 4 years into this 8 years, we had a plague that kind of put the world on halt, and we didn't really know what to do. We wanted fights, we wanted entertainment, but none of it was really going on, sports-wise. And the UFC decided to open up the Apex and run cards there. And they were running them almost weekly for a while. And then we thought, oh, this is nice until, we get vaccines and everything kind of not reverts to completely normal, but gets a little bit better for us. And then they just kept doing it. And as someone who recaps every UFC event, it's hard. It's real hard on me. I wake up in cold sweats sometimes, thinking oh my God, it's Kennedy Njoku main event. Jairzinho Rosenstruck, no. But Kennedy Njoku is actually in my boys' stable right now. But
honestly, on that Rosenstruck card, there's that meme of MMA Guru just sort of really depressed watching one of the cards. That was you watching that Rosenstruck card, doing that recap.
Oh my God, it was. I don't like being compared to him. I'm not trying to start a YouTube beef, but that is accurate. I was watching Rosenstruck and I just went, oh no, come on, no. I was where's that John Bernthal Punisher meme where he's like, no, 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 wait, 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 wait. That was me having to watch that card. But like we just kind of there's just so many fights going on, and I'm not saying that more fights are a bad thing. It's just more fights with lesser consequences at a lower level are a bad thing.
Yeah. I think the big things that have stood out for me are, I think there's two of them. I think that on the whole, I think the quality of fighters at the top band has got a lot better, which you're going to come to expect. Fighters are going to get more well-rounded, adapt and change different techniques, and we're seeing that at the top level. I think if you were to put, say, the 2016 champions up against their 24 counterparts, I think the modern day group more than likely beat the other side. But I think the bottom rung has got a lot worse, and that's because the UFC are putting out so much content that they're needing more bodies. And you look at some of the guys on this Apex prelims, I think they wouldn't look out of place on a regional show. And that doesn't take anything away from fighters who fight in like LFA and Cage Fury, because there are some good fighters out there. It's just when the UFC prides itself on being the biggest promotion, the best of the best, you expect to see that. And I look at some of these Apex cards and I don't see that.
I don't understand why they don't like directly have like LFA and other promotions be openly UFC like minor leagues that you can build up into and get a contract with, because like, and then at that point you can stream LFA fights if they could work that out on ESPN, and then keep the UFC fight nights and the main events, pay-per-views and stuff like that for like bigger things. But I'm sure there's a business reason that I'm not qualified to answer.
It's the brand, and it's those letters. That brand carries so much weight. I've actually put forward, can you remember Strikeforce used to have its Challenges series?
It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so you still had fights under the Strikeforce brand, but you were sort of keeping the full-on Strikeforce label for your elite, high-quality shows. I think doing something like that for the Apex card, if you called it like UFC Apex 1, and separate it from the actual UFC fight nights and UFC pay-per-views, the feeling of being watered down wouldn't be as prevalent.
Oh, yeah. I think, because that's like the big thing, it just feels watered down, One thing, though, that's pretty funny to me, I just now realized this. You said, like, oh, if the current guys, the current champions of now, went back and fought their 2016 counterparts, Jon Jones actively is trying to do that. You know what I mean? Like, he's actively trying to fight, but he doesn't want to fight prime Stone Cold Stipe. He wants to fight 40-plus-year-old Stipe.
Well, Jon wouldn't have been champion at 200. So it'd be DC versus Pereira, and that would be a massacre.
Oh, DC would smoke Pereira, yeah.
Oh, we'll be talking about Alex Pereira and his lack of wrestling in a lot more detail later on in the show. Please don't worry. It's a good thing, though, you did mention Jon Jones, because I actually had some notes in front of me here, and originally we were going to talk about Pantoja and Usyk headlining UFC 301, but the big news came out yesterday. Our good friend Jonathan Dwight Jones into yet more trouble, again involving anti-drugs authorities. So, Joe, we know where you stand in regards to Jon Jones. Let's say you're not the biggest fan of his behaviour. What's your take on this?
It's pretty. I when I heard about it, I didn't believe it, because all week, because of April Fools on Monday, I've been like, every time I see like an outlandish thing, I always look and like, when was this posted? Like, was this on Monday? And I saw that and I went, that is a very believable April Fool's joke. And then I kept seeing it and I went, oh my God, this actually happened. What a wreck this guy. I mean, I've had substance problems in my life. I used to have an alcohol problem. So I understand that it's hard and stuff, but like, how many like mistakes are you allowed to make, and that we can just keep going? It's okay, John. We'll let you cheat. We'll let you do all this ridiculous, unacceptable behavior. I I just don't understand.
Yeah.
It's like he's denying it pretty hard though, so I do want to see the full proof because in you're innocent until proven guilty. It just sounds incredibly believable, sadly.
Yeah. And I think it raises a lot of questions, not only with Jon Jones, but also like the UFC's new anti-drugs authority, because it's basically all in-house now. USADA are done away with, and the UFC, they call the shots. And I look at this on a few fronts. First off, the whole idea of Jon threatening a woman when he has a history of doing this sort of thing. There was all the reports of domestic violence. So there's that another sort of stigma that always comes with the Jon Jones sort of facade. And then you got this idea of why is he being so volatile? Is this Jon once again trying to avoid drug testing, which he's had a proven history of drug use? One of the things that really stood out for me, because I actually read the report that was released by the Albuquerque State Police, that from what I heard, the anti-drugs authority basically were going to this tester and saying, just keep it under wraps until we hear from the UFC. And we've always had this fear that with the UFC being in-house now, is this them trying to hide another discrepancy with Jon Jones and his not being a clean athlete?
We need Mark Hunt to sue again.
It raises so many questions.
That's so bad. That's such a bad look. I mean, I did not know that part of it. That is haunting and terrifying because, like, this. I mean, as much as we make fun of them because of things they say, it makes you really kind of think about that Diaz line. Oh, these motherfuckers on steroids, you know. But
because if the UFC are doing everything in house, and I'm not suggesting that they're being biased, I'm just saying it's open to suspicion. Like you could have a situation, for example, let's say Conor versus Chandler happens. You could put Michael Chandler through every single strict drug test that you can, and let Conor, who's the biggest star, take whatever he wants. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's what can happen if you're doing everything in-house. That's why you need an independent authority. That's why, even though USADA could be quite pedantic at times, because they were an independent authority, you trusted their judgment within reason.
Yeah, and now, I mean, like, Conor has been juicing up damn near openly, juicing up post-injury. He's on that stuff, to quote Joey Diaz. He's on that stuff that makes his head bigger. Like he's on that rocket fuel. Like his head is so big in that new Roadhouse movie. It was like I think they have to like I think they took notes from what like they did when they filmed Tito Ortiz in movies. they just pull the camera back like 50 feet
to try and fit his head in.
Yeah, but Tito Ortiz, they had to use like a telescope to film him because like he's just walking around with this giant head. God forbid Henry Cejudo and him are on the screen at the same time.
So we've heard all these sort of stories regarding Jon and his latest misdemeanor. Do you think the UFC are going to do anything with him, or do you think they're going to try and sweep it under the rug again?
They're going to sweep it under the rug again. There's no way. They are for some reason so enamored with this idea of like Jon Jones, the guy who has ruined multiple pay-per-views for them, the guy who's made them move pay-per-views, and isn't the biggest box office draw when it comes down to it. Like you would expect a guy like that to get that many chances to be like a Conor level draw. He's not. And then actively like just ducking fighters, you know. Yeah, like that. It's not even like to go into like, you know, the cheating he does in the actual fight, you know, not just what his blood content is. I don't understand. I think they're just going to keep doing it until something happens to him. He hit a pregnant woman, T-boned her, fled the scene, then came running back to grab a bunch of weed cash and condoms and ran back away. I got forced into not therapy, but it was he got forced into rehab, took a nap, woke up and walked out on his own volition saying he was cured. And the UFC didn't do anything until he popped hot for coke. I mean, like, pretty sure this guy's just gonna get swept under the rug for like any of his indiscretions, just under the rug from now until the end of time.
This is a pretty morbid way to start the UFC 300 pay-per-view. This is supposed to be like a celebration, and here we are talking. Ironically enough, Jon Jones, he was this dark cloud that hung over UFC 200, and he's the dark cloud again, hanging over UFC 300.
Yeah, I hope they ask Dana a bunch of questions so we can get the appearance of Dana Red.
We're looking into it.
I gotta be honest. I think I love like us just naturally going like there's the 3 stages of Dana. Dana White, who don't believe his lies, and then there's Dana Pink, like he's probably gonna call you a goof. Then there's Dana Red, and he's definitely gonna call you a goof.
As long as this doesn't lead to Nunes main eventing again, I'm all for it.
It's probably gonna have to. Jon Jones Nunes.
We are
the lead say a special guest referee.
We are here though to talk about UFC 300, and we're finally going to talk about the card in a lot more detail. So this card has been hyped up for a long, long time. I'd probably say since, I would say 295, 296, the sort of rumours and the expectation of this card has started to ramp up. Do you think, looking at this card on paper, it has lived up to that hype?
Yes and no. So I think if you look at the bottom of the card and you think about every name on here and like why they're here, you can justify all of these fights and get kind of excited even for all of these fights. One fight in particular of like these really good ones, you go, okay, I don't want to watch that, but I'm interested to see who wins. That's Holly Holm and Kayla Harrison. But all of these fights, except for the main event, you go, yeah, that deserves to be on here for sure. Because even like the co-main event of Zhang Weili and Yao Jian now, you understand why that's here. Like,
yeah.
Is that the most exciting, thrilling fight? No, but you understand why it's here. Like Bobby Green, Jim Miller, like, oh, that sounds like a really fun fight. And it's like, but on UFC 300, like, yeah, but Jim Miller is trying to be the first guy to fight at 100, 200, and 300. And that's sick. And I mean, he's like Mr. UFC, like, Mr. Journeyman for the UFC. He's awesome. Jessica Andrade, Marina Rodriguez should be fun. Then you got like really cool up and coming fighters. Like one of my favorite fights in this prelims is Sadiq Youssef versus Diego Lopez.
That's going to be such a good fight.
I'm so excited because I'm a big fan of both. But then like you look at that main event, you kind of go, oh, like, you guys got that one? The one you stole from another card? Thought you guys had this planned months in advance.
I'm in the exact same boat with you. I think that the main event could have been a lot more sort of eye-catching, and it's very clear what the UFC did. They just took UFC 301's main event and just plonked it on there. But I think
panicked.
Yeah, the rest of the card though, and the worst part is, and we'll talk about that when we get to the main event itself, because it is something that I do want to talk about in a lot more detail. On our screen, though, you can see the prelims there on your screen. As you mentioned before, Joe, a lot of star power, a lot of big names. I think you can make an argument that the vast majority of these fights, you could get away with headlining a fight night. Even if it's in the Apex, you could get away with headlining it. If you had to sort of, gun to your head, choose one that you think is more intriguing or more exciting than the others, what would it be?
Sadiq Youssef, Diego Lopez. I'm gonna go with that one. It's hard picking that one because there are two others that like really stand out. You got Calvin Kattar, Aljo Sterling at featherweight. That's really interesting to me. Yuri Prohaska, besides like Gaethje, he's probably the most exciting guy on the planet. Like besides like Gaethje and Max Holloway. But he's taken on Rakic, who can be boring. Rakic is very content to be boring, even though he has a ton of power and is a good striker. He's fine with it.
I think he's the light heavyweight dark horse. I think a lot of
Could
people
be.
are overlooking how good Rakic is.
He's very good. I think he's well balanced, like too, as a fighter. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. But it's for me that Sadiq Youssef and Diego Lopez is such an eye opener. It's so awesome.
I am really fascinated. Obviously, I'm a bit more biased when it comes to women's MMA than a lot of other people. I am really fascinated by this Holly Holm-Kayla Harrison fight. Not necessarily because I think it's going to be a good fight. I think that it's either going to play out one or two ways. Either we're going to have a depleted Kayla who's going to get pieced up on the feet, or Kayla looks as good as what she potentially can do and dominates it 30-27. But it's the intrigue of, can Kayla make the weight, and how good does she look in the actual octagon?
That's a fight I'm really ready, because I plan on watching this card from like bottom to top, kind of thing. But that's a fight I'm really excited to go and get food on, and then come back to find out who won, because I don't want to watch it at all. I just don't. If someone said, "Listen, Joe, you're never going to be rich, you're never going to be famous, and Alexa Grasso's divorcing you, but you don't have to watch a Holly Holm fight ever again," I might have to consider that deal. Like, but that said, I think that fight is really intriguing. I just go, oh my god, though, like, I gotta watch Holly Holm fight. Like, oh, come on. That said, if Kayla Harrison's depleted, does Holly Holm do the unthinkable and Holly Holm Kayla Harrison?
I think Kayla's going to be too strong for that.
There's only one way to find out. That now I'm actually a little bit intrigued for the meme of it. I'm a little intrigued.
And then there's of course the question of, like, the UFC. I have to give UFC a lot of credit here. They have done really well to hype up Kayla and make her seem like this sort of like unstoppable entity that's just going to come in here and just dominate people, take them down, ground and pound them. We don't know. We don't know how good Kayla Harrison actually is, because, like, no offense to like the PFL lightweights, but you compare them to Kayla, there's a big gulf in quality. And
two names at that top, and then everybody else.
Yeah. And the girl who beat her was Larissa Pacheco, who fought in the UFC, went 0-2, and got axed by the promotion. I mean, admittedly, she was very young, very green, and has got a lot better, but like, that was a girl who beat Kayla, in my opinion, fair and square.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought so too. That was actually like one of the bigger PFL fights.
And it was a good fight as well.
Yeah, I really liked that fight. I thought it was close, like, because I know some people were like kind of either or, but most people were leaning Pacheco, and I thought Pacheco won, but it was a close fight. But I don't know, like, there's a difference between being really good at 155 and being really good at 135. Like, that's 20 pounds.
Yeah. Do you think she makes the weight?
No, she's too big, but not in a bad way, but like, I feel like, but I don't know if I would say that if a guy was fighting. I wonder if what's wrong with me, but yeah, I think she's a little too big. I think she makes like 136. I could see her making that like barrier, right? But I think that extra pound might throw her over the edge.
I think she's enough of a pro to get down to 135.
How's she gonna look though?
It's the performance. That's the thing. Because the one that always sticks in my mind is TJ at 125. He made the scale, and a breeze could have knocked him down.
Oh yeah, and then he got hit with like a wrecking ball of a forehead. Dude, like, imagine like you cut all that weight, and so you're more susceptible to being knocked out, and then you got hit with like the force of Francis Ngannou's punching power at flyweight from ducking into a headbutt. Like, Lord of mercy. Those two are new. I love making fun of big-headed fighters because I'm part of the club. I can get away with it.
Well, we're talking about a fighter that a lot of people think is a big head, but in a very different way. So we're going to talk about the first fight on the main card. Now, I want to stress that I don't personally think that, but I do know a lot of people feel that this guy does rub people the wrong way. And it is Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage, which is opening up the main card here. And Bo Nickal comes in at a minus 2,100 favourite, which makes him the second biggest favourite in UFC history. Who was the biggest of all time?
Oh, wasn't it like an undercard fight? It was an undercard fight, and it was a women's MMA fight, wasn't it?
That was the biggest upset, because that was Agapova versus Dobson. Ironically enough, it's Bo Nickal as well, because he was a minus 2,500 favourite when he fought Val Woodburn.
Wow. He is the biggest favorite of all time? Holy crap.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people obviously raising eyebrows when they found out this fight was going to be on the main card. Where do you personally stand on this one, Joe? Do you think that...
I'm with them. It shouldn't be on the main card.
Yeah. I don't have an issue with Bo Nickal fighting on UFC 300, just not the main card.
Yeah, I thought he should open up the card.
I think
like
so.
Admittingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got to put Prohaska or Aljo on this main card. Don't put Holly home. I don't care what her legacy says. You know, but I think Aljo or Yuri has to be on this main card, and it's kind of rough to not have it. That said, this kid's really good.
That's a big thing that stood out for me with Bo Nickal. It's because I watched his 5 fights, obviously on the regional scene, the Contender Series, and his first few matches in the UFC. And we all know about his wrestling acumen, like multi-time NCAA champion. But I think the big thing that stood out for me is even 5 fights into his career, he seems to be picking up the other elements of MMA quite quickly. Like, his striking isn't perfect, but it's very good for a guy with 5 fights. Same with his jiu-jitsu, same with his ring craft, cage control, that sort of thing. And I think that's a very... I understand why the UFC are putting their sort of weight behind this train. I just think main card of UFC 300 is a bit too much, and it can create resentment. People don't like being told, you will like this man. They don't like the sort of Roman Reigns treatment. And I think, to an extent, Bo Nickal's getting that.
He's getting a little bit of it. He is definitely our Samoan named Joe right now. Who's the final boss then? But this guy, I remember hearing about him. It was whenever we were previewing. I have it right here in front of me because I'm so bad at remembering cards. But it was 285. And the big thing we kept talking about is everyone acts like this guy is the second coming. He's the unicorn, you know? And like the concept of a unicorn is a guy with like no faults, like the perfect fighter. And we as we've said, there is no such thing as a perfect fighter. I toss unicorn around, but I don't really mean it. Like a unicorn for me is like Shavkat, maybe JDM. But this kid, and I can say kid because he's actually like 2 years younger than me. I'm his senior. I would bully him in school. No, this guy is insane. This guy is awesome. You know, he has power in his hands. He's a little patient on the feet. He isn't just flinging it. Like he needs to tighten up his striking, but he isn't like, you know, like Saturday Night Special Bobby Boucher like style of throwing a shot. On the ground, he's a very good grappler. Like you don't hear much about like these superstar wrestlers getting triangle chokes off their back. And he's going to take you down. Like he has enough championships and medals in his trophy room to say that you're not going to stop his takedown. After you might stop 1 or 2, you're not going to stop them all. And he's a finisher, so that's pretty exciting. I am happy that they're not just like throwing him to the deep end, even though he does need a little bit more step up of competition from Brundage, I think. but they didn't just go ahead and be like, all right, you're fighting Paulo Costa and Marvin Vettori. Like, oh. Unironically, I'm not picking on him. Roman Dolidze would have been a fight. Then I would have been like, yeah, okay, that's around the level I want to see Bo Nickal fight at right now.
Paul Craig?
Oh, Paul Craig I'd have been down for.
Yeah.
Shao Borralho would have been, who's fighting Paul Craig soon. Actually, another guy.
Barallo's very good.
Yeah, I think Borralho is very good, but he's boring. And that's not a knock on him. The best fighter of all time is boring. You know?
GSP.
But, yeah, undeniably the best fighter ever. Even if you like account Jon Jones and all them. But that's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too sidetracked. But Borralho would have been fun. But this kid is... I keep saying kid. I feel like Dana White now. I'm slowly turning more and more bald as I say this. This guy is insane. Like, he does seem very good. But he did knee Jamie Pickett in the nuts and then took him down.
I think the big thing that stood out for me with Bo Nickal is obviously his wrestling background. He's going to be incredibly dangerous in the sort of takedown threat. But one of the things I quite like about him is even at this early stage of his career, it's almost as if, okay, I know that this guy is wary of my takedowns, so I'm going to go high. Because I even watched that with the Val Woodburn fight, because he sort of like feints, I'm going to go low, so you can see Woodburn's hands drop. And then when he tries doing it again, that's when Bo goes high, catches him with the right, Woodburn's on wobbly legs, Bo finishes him off. Which I think is very smart to be thinking that way this early in your career.
5 fights in his career, yeah. He's not a super young rookie. He's 28, but like 5 fights in your career, like you know, like he's obviously been watching the sport, and he obviously has good training like partners. Because I love it when a wrestler, like a scary wrestler, knows how to feint. You know, that's like one of the big things at that preschool. What's their name? That preschool Team Alpha Male. They I love Team Alpha Male. I just like making I'm an evil person, I guess. But so like Team Alpha Male, like Chad Mendez, when he had like that really good run, he was doing a lot of feints and like would feint ways into landing a left hook high, or the really big one that he got really good at was the level change into the uppercut as the opponent kind of lowers to stop him. Like he even caught Aldo with it, like that shot a couple times. So I always like seeing that from fighters, and Bo Nickal's pretty good at doing that. I think it was an uppercut that, if I remember correctly, that he blasted Woodburn with. And he's a southpaw, so he's a tricky guy.
Why do you think the UFC in particular have chosen Cody Brundage as the opponent? Obviously, we've got a guy here who has a 10-5 record. He has 4 wins in the UFC, which was his most recent one against Zach Reese, which he won by a full-on rampage slam against an unbeaten fighter, ironically enough. Other wins, Jacob Malkoum, which was by disqualification. Dolce Longiambula, which I had to take a lot of time to try and get that one right. And interestingly enough, Trajan Gore, who was a guy who was supposed to fight Bo Nickal before he dropped out and Val Woodburn took his place.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of funny.
Is Brundage just a warm body, or do you think there's any aspect to his game where they want to test Bo?
I think it's kind of a mix of both, because I think there is an aspect in Brundage's game that, for me, stood out whenever I was kind of researching that made the UFC go, okay, this is the perfect warm body, is Brundage wants to wrestle. And you're not going to out-wrestle Bo Nickal. Then again, we saw recently Henry Cejudo get out-wrestled, but a comment, like a good educated guess here and analysis shows that Bo Nickal's not going to get out-wrestled by Cody Brundage, and that's where Cody is strongest. So your one weakness or your one strength and advantage, Bo Nickal just dominates you in. And I think that's why they made this match. Because the UFC is going to probably give him easy fights. Probably not as easy as a certain 205 champion, but he might have like an easier path towards the title than other fighters do. So that is something to kind of see. That said, I don't expect this fight to
And I
last
think that's
very
part
long.
of the reason why it's on the main card as well. Like, someone put forward the theory that we have 3 title fights. There could be a chance, an unlikely one, but there could be a chance that all 5 of them go the distance by putting Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage on the main card, and we get the expected first round finish. That sort of, it opens the main card, or big spectacular UFC 300 first round TKO, that sort of thing. That's the theory I've heard put forward. In terms of Cody Brundage, though, because I have been doing a little bit of research, because I feel like we should try and give everybody on this card some kind of, positives. Very dangerous in the first round. Wrestling heavy fighter as well. I don't think his decision making is the best, though. I mean, I've seen sometimes where you just think, are you doing the right thing by, because there was a fight against Dumas where he kept going for that guillotine. He kept pulling a Dustin Poirier, going for the guillotine all the time, and it wasn't working. And then he rocked Rodolfo Vieira, and then tried and then shot him up.
Yeah, that's another thing too. That probably they're going like, oh, he doesn't have he's gonna just fall back on his like ideas and stuff, and I think they're gonna try to take advantage of that with this matchmaking. You got to give him the benefit of the doubt. Am I saying that Cody Brundage has no chance? No, that's ridiculous. There's only one fight I can think of at the top of my head that I could make that where one fighter has no chance, and that is probably Alexa Crossbow Valentina.
I knew that was coming. Yes.
Pause
I know your sense of humor.
I had to stop. I've been doing this for 2 years, so I tried not to laugh so hard. I had to like really hard do it. That's probably like the only fight I can think of where one side just has no chance. Sorry, Val. No, I think legitimately though, he could pull it off. He could do something. He does have power. He does. We don't know what happens if Bo Nickal gets into the later rounds, like technically, because like there's a difference between like having like superstar wrestling cardio and then having like an MMA cardio because you're getting hit more. I will say, historically speaking, wrestlers tend to have the best cardio when they transition over. That said, you never know. Getting hit takes a lot out of you. Hitting people takes a lot out of you. So you never know. But I got Bo Nickal in the first round.
Same here. I've got Bo first round as well. The question becomes whether or not it's going to be through knockout or submission.
Yeah, that's where it gets kind of hard. I'm going to pick a weird combination of both. Now, I think he'll probably submit him. I think he's a better grappler than he is like a striker, for sure, obviously. But I like his instincts on the ground when going for chokes and snatching necks, admittingly, a lot. I'd love to see him go for limbs more, but I'd imagine like going for the legs, like leg locks and stuff like that, are probably like a big no-no with his mental, because you have to give up so much position to go for a leg, and that probably makes the wrestler part of his brain just like scream in agony, even considering it. So, because I don't think there's very many wrestlers who, like, or collegiate wrestlers who actively hunted for legs. Like Mark Coleman and Pride. Like, because he did that once and lost a very obvious.
I was going to say
fight.
that was it Kosaka?
Yeah, probably the guy that they had fight Hickson 3 times, and like Hickson smoked him, and then Hickson told everybody, "See, I am the greatest ever."
I have to look this up. Was it? It was either Tamura or it was Kosaka.
I don't think it was Tamura. Was it Tamura? I'm trying to remember. It was Tamura or Kosaka. I think it was Kosaka, though.
Yeah, I'm going to just look this up right now. The joys of live broadcasting here, that we get caught up on distractions, but I am actually very curious about this. It's a good thing that I actually have Mark Coleman in my searches recently with all of his good stories. He's actually going to be at UFC 300. Takada.
Yeah, he's presenting the B. It was Takada? Okay.
Which makes sense because Takada was part of Shuto, which was sort of like very hybrid MMA pro wrestling, so...
That's I believe that's the guy who Jack Slack said that might be the worst fighter he's ever seen. Like, unironically.
I'm surprised he didn't say Musashi, knowing Jack Slack.
Which is good. Well, but I think he had that guy, and because of like all of his wins are kind of dubious, and he fought at that level, it was kind of weird. But I think Bo Nickal's probably winning by submission. I don't know if you're leaning towards that or TKO.
I'm leaning TKO simply because I think the Cody Brundage, it's one of the big things I've noticed about Cody in his fights is he can actually start fights very well. But if one thing starts going wrong, it collapses very quickly. So I can see a situation where he gets taken down and so like he takes that big punch and starts thinking, oh God, no. And that's when they start rolling in. Similar to what happened with Alex Pereira.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, what was that finish? Vicente Luque and
yes,
Joaquin Buckley recently? Yeah. Buckley, like, Luque didn't even, like, try and fight him off. He was just like, you got me. I was like, what? Luque, no.
That's sad to say. Like, knowing how tough Luque is, but... That's what happens to fighters. Like, Father Time catches up and you just don't have that same drive, that same durability as...
I think that Sheffield fight did something. Yeah.
We'll try and move on to fight number 2 then. We'll try and get this back into a more positive note. But we do have a good fight that's going to do it for Hosea. Number 1 is taking on number 4 in the UFC lightweight division. It is Charles Oliveira taking on Arman Tsarukyan. And it's Tsarukyan who comes in as a minus 230 favourite. You can get Oliveira at plus 190. And I think this fight comes at a very interesting time for the lightweight division because obviously a combination of Ramadan, the timing of UFC 300, the BMF belt taking place. We have a situation here where Islam Makhachev could go a year without defending his belt. Now, at this moment in time, at the time of recording, we don't know what's happening with UFC 302. I've heard rumours of them putting together a Dustin Poirier title fight just to give Islam something to do. It's gotten very messy in a weight class where I don't think you can really afford to have these kind of stalling and... Because we've got a great champion in Makhachev who's not fighting.
Yeah, it's kind of rough. I understand, like... religious reasons and stuff like that. Like, so Ramadan, I'm never going to be like, oh no, like that's not cool. Like, it's, you got to do what you got to do. But at the same time, it's kind of rough with like timing issues and stuff because this is a division that moves quick. Like, there's always a guy ready to go, and like Benny and Charles was supposed to be a number one contenders fight, and it didn't work out that way. Admittingly, even though I love that first fight, the Volkanovski stuff kind of hurt it a little bit. They should have had.
I've always said that
instead of him the second time. Yeah, why would he weigh in as the backup if he's not going to be the backup? Like, it's that's ridiculous. But here we are, and you got a guy in Tsarukyan, this is like a danger for Islam. Is this division is just getting better? Like, they're gonna just keep getting better. Like you're the man right now, and you're easily the best lightweight on the planet. But you got a guy in like Tsarukyan who you lost a close fight with, and he has looked insane in this since
and he was
just hit a streak.
He was incredibly young, and he took that fight on short notice as well.
That's his debut. I'm seeing here. Jeez, I didn't know it was his debut, and then like. His only setback since, I think, is a super close fight with Mateusz Gamrot. Like, super close fight. But then, there's on the other side of it, it's Charles, who just didn't look the same in this fight with Islam, but since then and before that, he was so terrifying to deal with. Like, I don't know how you pick against
I think one of
him.
the best things I've seen in MMA, probably in this so-called like post-lockdown, is been the way that the fan base have really enamored to Charles Oliveira. Because Charles Oliveira for a long time was the sort of hipster darling. Like, people would tune in to like,
Yeah.
he'd be on like a fight night main card, and he'd fight someone like a Jared Gordon or someone of that sort of ilk, get a submission finish, but I think those sort of newish fans, the ones that only really care about the title fights and the big main events, they weren't really aware of them. So seeing those fans embracing Charles Oliveira has been really good to see. I think sometimes these fans can be a little bit too obsessive, but it's good to see as somebody who's always had like an affinity for the guy.
Yeah. It's always been really fun.
Because I have to be honest, when Charles Oliveira got the belt, like I've had a lot of misses doing these kind of shows, but one of the bigger ones I had was, I had this fear that Charles Oliveira was sort of a bit of a paper champion, because he didn't beat one of like the elite guys to get the belt. So seeing him submitting Justin Gaethje, submitting Dustin Poirier, it made me realise how good he actually is.
I thought he was going to lose as soon as he fought like the Poirier and the Gaethjes as well. I thought, wow, he's really good, but is he better than the two top dogs of this division? Turns out he was, and that's saying something. And especially when you guy like Gaethje goes, I've never been hit that hard in my life. You know, like guys like that are saying that. It's like, oh, okay. It makes you wonder, like, how he's still pretty young, relatively young. Ton of fight years. His fight age is insane. But this is an interesting fight. I'm not surprised to see him be the underdog, though, because Tsarukyan has a lot of.
And I think stylistically, it's a tough match for Charles.
Yeah, you got a guy who's probably faster than you, because Tsarukyan seems really fast in there. He's got less power, I'd say, than Charles, but he's a big finisher too, and he can go like nonstop, push the pace, wear you out wrestler and grappling game.
I actually, to be honest, I actually think that I've actually got a few notes actually written down here. I think Tsarukyan. I actually think that Charles trying to push the pace on Tsarukyan might be one of his better avenues to victory, because one of the things I have noticed from Tsarukyan is that, yes, he does go very hard, but it's very hard for 2 rounds. It does drop off come 3, 4, and 5. That's one of the reasons, in my opinion, he lost the Gamrot fight. Now, this is obviously going to be over 3, so it's not going to be as pressing an issue, but you've got a guy in Charles Oliveira who, in his striking, uses a lot of teep kicks, likes to target the body, and if you can push the pace and really target that cardio, it could be a lot tougher for Tsarukyan than it looks on paper. I think that's one of the best avenues for victory for Charles Oliveira.
Okay. He's got a good jab too. So with the teep kicks and the jab and the threat of a tie clinch, if he steps in as Tsarukyan steps in, he can get the tie clinch to kind of tie him up, slow it down, land the knees and elbows. Like, he actually has a pretty good couple of defensive layers to slow down Tsarukyan and kind of wear him out throughout some rounds.
Yeah.
So that is interesting.
Because we all saw in the greatest title fight in UFC history 3 months ago how much working in the clinch and wearing down your opponent works.
Yeah. I know. We thought we were special. We did. And
you knew I was going to throw that in at some point.
Yeah. I knew. You know, there's a Valentina joke somewhere. There's a Jon Jones joke somewhere. There will be Rocky's champion.
Obviously, you're going to be covering this when you do the post-fight reaction, but I did like when they were doing like the Demont versus Jermaine thing, and they were bringing up current champion Raquel Pennington. It's just like, what kind of bizarre world am I living in here?
I forgot she fought last night. I'm going to have to watch that fight because I woke up late.
It is awful.
But it's Norma Dumont, and I...
Put it this way, Joe. They were calling her Norma Makayev after the fight.
Oof. Norma Dumont is not super exciting, but
I
she's very
wonder
fun to
why.
watch. uh, Wink. What's Jimmy Altieri say? Is like a woman with small feet and big, you know, like it's a win in any man's book. Speaking to your microphone.
Let's try and change the subject here. Arman Tsarukyan, 21-3 record. His last win came in just over a minute against Neal, which was a real sort of eye-opening breakout moment for him. I think that was the point that a lot of people sat up and realised how good Tsarukyan actually is. One of the big tropes about the lightweight division has been that a lot of people have hyped up this kind of new guard, this new wave that was going to surpass the sort of Oliveira, Gaethje, Poirier sort of ilk. A lot of them have sort of fallen by the wayside. Tsarukyan's the only one that seems to have broken through. What do you think he had that Ismagulov or Garam Kutaleze or Joel Alvarez, what did they not have which Tsarukyan does? Fizayev?
Fizayev, yeah. Admittingly, better matchmaking? Because I think of that old guard, and I love Benny. Love Benny to death. I think he was probably the most beatable. You know? And I think that really helped him out. The other thing, too, is sometimes you put that pace on guys, and they just can't handle it. Like, especially if you hit him pretty hard. And he does hit pretty hard. Not quite like Charles level of, like, tasering somebody when you hit him. But he's got wins over, like, a lot of quality names. Like, Ismagulov is on there. Matt Frivola. Albin Mercier, who I always butcher that name. I hope I got it this time. But he's such a fast, I'm gonna win the first 2 rounds and I'm gonna survive the 3rd round kind of a guy. But he does hit hard and he can just put you away. It seems like he doesn't have the best like submission game. I don't ever think of him as like a submission threat. I think of him more as like I'm gonna beat you up on the feet and then smash kind of a threat. He isn't like a smash factory guy though. He's more of a like he does kick with you. He strikes with you because he need Benny pretty hard. But I also remember him throwing a lot of kicks against Gamrot.
Tsarukyan, he's kind of like an AKA guy.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like you see it, you see all the striking flow into then like a shot. Like not less like Islam and Habib, but more like he reminds you of like Rockhold actually a little bit, and Kane a little bit. Like when Kane was like pretty healthy. Kane's actually probably a good example, just with like a worse gas tank. I kind of like that one.
You're gonna just jot it down in your notes.
Yeah, Kane Velasquez equals Arman Tsarukyan. Yeah. That's an AKA. Because I was a big fan of old AKA.
I mean, they withdrew from a lot of fights, but very talented, Jim.
Oh yeah, super good. Yeah, they had Josh Koscheck, John Fitch, and Mike Swick at one point. Then they were all in the top 10.
I'm going to be interested to see where Tsarukyan... I think Tsarukyan's going to be the one that's going to try and push the pace on this fight. I am interested to see what direction he goes for. Like, bearing in mind, I think part of Charles Oliveira's law and part of the success he had as lightweight champion was there being a lot of guys who were too scared to go into his guard. Because I would see situations where Charles would get dropped. He would get like rocked in the striking. And then immediately just fall onto his back. But because Charles Oliveira is Charles Oliveira, nobody wanted to go down with him. Which gave Charles the time to recover, get back to his feet, and get himself back into the match. Like we saw it against Poirier, we saw it against Gaethje. Do you think Tsarukyan is going to jump into that guard? Do you think he's going to think, hey, I'm not scared of this guy. Wrestling's my forte, I'm going to jump in there? Or is he going to do what he did against Darby Hamosh and just make it a kickboxing match?
I could see him doing it like against Hamosh. But I also kind of think about this. The reason, one of the things like Islam beat Charles, right? He submitted Charles. It's even crazier. But he knocked him down and then just followed him to the mat. Like, didn't give him time to breathe. I could kind of see Tsarukyan going like that. That might work. Maybe we're just too afraid of this guy. When he's wobbled, he's not going to tap us. And then goes for it. Oof. Getting old. Hands all beat up. I think he follows him to the mat.
I'm leaning that way as well.
I think he's not going to engage the wrestling unless he knocks him down, and then he's like, well, I'm already here,
Or Charles hurts him on the feet and causes Tsarukyan to shoot, because that's what happened against Kevin Lee.
Yeah, that is true. Kevin Lee trying to get him with the Brazilian tap. You tap on the other side of the ref so they let go and then keep going.
If you had to put your money where your mouth is for this one, who are you leaning towards, Joe?
This is the closest one for me to pick on this card. And I'm picking Charles. I've picked against him enough to just go, nope. I don't think I've ever been right in any of my predictions for a Charles fight. Now that I think about it, the one time I did pick him, he won. I'd picked Benny over him. Yeah, but I'm gonna pick Charles here. I kind of want Tsarukyan to win because I think he has a little bit more upside in this division, but I think Charles might still. I think he just had a bad night against Islam in their fight.
I'm picking Tsarukyan to win this one. I think stylistically it's a tough matchup for Charles.
Okay.
I'm going to say second round. Oh
wow.
Yes, I do.
Charles.
I have a lot of faith in Tsarukyan. I think he's building a bit more confidence in his hands, and Charles can be a little bit chinny. I could see a situation where Charles gets rocked, and similar to what happened with Makhachev, Tsarukyan not being afraid to go into the guard and getting the finish. What I am going to be interested to see, though, is the likelihood is Makhachev is going to headline the Abu Dhabi card in October. Between this fight and the Gaethje versus Holloway winner, who fights Makhachev next?
I think it depends who fights or who wins. If Holloway wins, then I could see them going like, oh, the big money. Dana White would think of transforming into Dana Pearlescent and and then try and book the Max fight. I think if Tsarukyan wins and Gaethje wins, then I think if Gaethje wins, they'll probably give it to the winner of this fight, admittingly.
And
based on meritocracy, as a big Justin Gaethje fan, it should be the winner of this fight.
And I also think so as well, because if Tsarukyan wins, and personally I think he's going to, I think Tsarukyan is a tougher matchup stylistically for Makhachev.
I think Max Holloway out of the four guys is the toughest matchup for Islam stylistically, because no one takes Max down, it seems like.
I am interested to see how Max could do against a wrestler, because that's something we haven't really seen from Max.
He shut them all down. He just stomps on them. I feel like all the wrestlers I can think of him fighting. But at the same time, I kind of want to see it. I kind of want to see him fight Islam. That sounds so much fun.
And it's a good thing we're talking about Max Holloway, because it is time for the third fight on the card, and we unleash and pray to the gods of violence. It is Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. The BMF title's going to be on the line for this one. Gaethje comes in as a slight favourite, but I have seen a lot of money increasingly coming into Max over the past couple of days. So before we actually get into the X's and O's of the match itself, what's your personal opinion on the BMF belt? What is it to you, in your opinion?
What's the BMF belt? Just kidding. I don't. It's not a real belt. It's not a real belt. It's a. If that's a real belt, then we need the NMF belt. Nicest
Wonderboy's got that in the game.
Yeah, Wonderboy. There was someone else he could have fought.
Modafferi?
Probably you.
I'm not a nice. I mean, you could.
Nicer than me.
I mean, I've got half of MMA Guru's fans hating me right now.
Do you?
Yeah, long story.
That's very fair. that's a volatile bunch. So
I'm similar to you. I think they made a mistake. I actually like the idea of the BMF belt for UFC 244 because you had Diaz versus Masvidal. They both have sort of like these streetwise personas. So I think the idea of like sort of like a one-off ceremonial, let's just do this for a bit of fun, perfectly fine. Trying to make it into a regular thing, I don't feel right about that. I know why it's done, for marketing reasons, for business reasons, because I don't think Gaethje versus Poirier 2 on its own would have been enough to justify headlining a pay-per-view. But because it had the BMF belt on there, it sort of like added a little bit more to that match.
Yeah, definitely a weird
But also
one.
as well from like Makhachev's perspective, like how must he feel when the UFC... It's almost as if the UFC is saying, you're not interesting enough, you don't fight entertaining enough to be a champion. No, you don't fight interestingly enough for us. So we're going to create this belt in your own weight class to sort of like celebrate guys who people want to watch fight.
Yeah, it's really weird, like when you think of it that way, because I'm sure in their mind it's like, oh, what's wrong with the Intercontinental title? And it's like, that's not how this works in a real fight. Like, Hulk Hogan is the only guy who was upset someone else had a belt beside him, when it's kind of disrespectful to the champ, you know? Because Usman openly was like, kept talking about that BMF belt, and it was kind of cringy, but he's not the best talker. But you could kind of see where he's coming from. You know, whenever he was like talking, like didn't fight Mosfet, it's like, after I beat him, I get the BMF belt, right? And it's like, yeah, it's kind of, you know, calling somebody the baddest dude on the planet when they're not even the champion in the division is probably like just gotta eat at you a little bit.
It's more like DiBiase's $1 million belt.
Yeah, which is still more credible than this one. You know, LA Knight had that belt.
Yeah.
Yeah, so does Stone Cold, technically. Yeah.
I will say, though, belt or no belt, this is a match that a lot of people have wanted for a long, long time. Like, these guys are two of the most action-packed, fan-favourite fighters out there. It's a perfect fight, in my opinion, to be on this kind of card.
This is probably the number 1 and number 2 most exciting guys ever, and we get to see them fight. Like, I gotta pinch myself. It's mind blowing. When this fight got announced, I went, "Are you serious? This is real? I love this." Like, this fight is the reason you buy this pay-per-view and don't complain. Because wow, this is a wild one.
So we'll start with Justin Gaethje here, a 25-4 record. His last fight came in that BMF title match up against Dustin Poirier, UFC 291. And along with Poirier, he also has wins over Fiziev, Chandler, Tony Ferguson. He was the guy that, in a lot of people's eyes, started Tony Ferguson's decline. And along with that, we've also got Edson Barboza, Michael Johnson, and Cowboy Cerrone. So a who's who when it comes to the great action fighters of the lightweight division. Both 35 years old. There are going to be some question marks about whether or not Justin Gaethje is going to keep being this man. But I have to say, though, a lot of people, when Justin Gaethje came into the UFC, they thought to themselves, hey, this guy is incredibly entertaining, but has he got the sort of intangibles to be an elite level fighter? I think he's proven, and thanks to Trevor Whitman as well for doing this, he's proven he has.
Oh yeah, he's the man. I think he just happened. I think he just kind of got a little unlucky. Like, he's probably a champion in almost any other era, but he happened to be, you know, the number 2 best lightweight on the planet when Khabib was champion, and Khabib was motivated by the death of his father. It's just not going to be a good time. And then when he finally gets the Charles fight, Charles had elevated and jumped up that like 5 levels to be the best, and it's like, dude, just unlucky. But at the same time, this guy is probably first ballot Hall of Famer. If he says that he's going to retire soon, he openly says he doesn't have much time left, and it's like, this guy's first ballot, whether he ever wins a belt or not. I think I don't think he's ever been in a bad fight. And every time he signs for a fight, I know everyone in my group just goes, Justin Gaethje's fighting soon? Oh, we got to be there. We'll be there. Yeah.
Like, honestly, I'm trying to think, like, what is Justin Gaethje's worst fight in the UFC? And the only one I could think of possibly is, like, James Vick. And that's only because it finished so quickly.
Yeah, the Vick fight, probably.
And James Vick was the bookmaker's favourite going into that match.
He called him the Homer Simpson of MMA. You know? But it turns out he was Diedrich Tatum instead.
Well, we all know Mike Russell was the Homer Simpson of MMA.
Oh, yeah. That hammer fist was like was symbolically Mo coming down on the flying
Like,
machine.
honestly, I did the video for the greatest fat guy moments in MMA, and I had Russell versus Duffy, and I actually included that line of Mo saying, "Okay, Homer, he's tired, now's your chance, nudge him," and that's when the knockout comes in.
It's so funny. I remember that video. Yeah, James. What? Here's a harder question. What's his best fight?
Oh,
Like,
I've always been in a minority with this. Like, a lot of people think the Johnson fight. Even though he lost it, I think Eddie. I think the fight he had with Eddie, UFC 218. Because one of the things I loved about that fight was we saw Eddie working the body really well during those first two rounds. And meanwhile, Gaethje's attacking the legs. Like, this was sort of like pre-Whitman Gaethje. So it was very much sort of get in the clinch and just either work your dirty shots or especially target the legs. Which not many people do when they're in the clinch. They don't go for the legs.
Yeah. He'll get a single collar and low kick you. It's awesome.
Yeah, you don't see that these days. And
so
you can see that Gaethje's taking a lot of damage, but the kicks start adding up for Eddie. And you can see Eddie's dropping to the floor a lot of times and Gaethje's inviting him back up. You know something's going to give. You just don't know what it's going to be. And then eventually, like last minute of the fight, here comes the knee, and Gaethje's body says, I can't take any more.
It's that like ramping tension, like building up in that fight. That's a really good one. I have a hot take. I have the hottest, scorching hot take. My favorite Justin Gaethje fight, and I'm a massive fan of both guys. It's Tony Ferguson.
It's his best performance.
That fight for 2 rounds is as close as you can get, and then Gaethje just starts pulling away. And for me, I think of the moments like when I watch that fight live, you just go, yo, he's doing that to Tony Ferguson? Like, what is going on? And also that came at like a really big, because that card is awesome for me, because it's like, oh, we're finally back with fights. I've been stuck in the house. Like, I smoked a pack of cigarettes because I was bored yesterday. Like, you know, so I think that has like some value. But probably another one is like Chandler or Fizayev's really good, but Chandler's crazy. Chandler knocks himself out on a takedown in round 2. That's amazing. That fight is crazy.
I showed one of my friends Chandler versus Gaethje, and they were just like, oh my god, what is happening here?
I showed a friend of mine that had only seen like 3 fights ever, Chandler versus Poirier, and they were like, I don't know how you watch this sport. And I went...
It's a drug. It's just something that just gets under your skin.
It's the best thing ever.
Yeah. One of the things I remember about the Ferguson fight was, like, obviously that was like the first lockdown show, the first fight after we came back, and I'd always heard this story that after that match, the UFC started intentionally turning down the mics on the cage because the shots that Gaethje was hitting Ferguson with were so hard, it was putting people off.
Wow, if that is true, that is insanity.
Like this guy is a hammer. This guy is a hammer, and he's refined as well.
He used to be really wild. Now he's kind of tightened. He'll still sometimes throw that haymaker that'll knock himself off balance if he misses, but he has no problem like piecing you up with a jab and then landing it big. Like we saw against Fiziev, he was like, "Oh, I probably should start jabbing this guy," and then the jab, he built his whole offense off of that and came back and won that fight in like a great fight. Like he will put when he puts leather on you, you're feeling it, but at the same time, you got to go against a guy like Max, though. Who's really hard to hit.
Yes. And it's a bulkier Max as well. So Max Holloway, a 25-7 record, former UFC featherweight champion. His last fight came in that division up against the Korean Zombie, which a lot of people expected that one to be a bit of a walkover for Max. Unfortunately for the Zombie's case, it turned out that way. But along with the Zombie, we also have wins over Arnold Allen, Yair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Frankie Edgar, Brian Ortega, 2 wins over Jose Aldo, Anthony Pettis, Ricardo Lamas, Jeremy Stevens, Cub Swanson. That's a who's who of featherweight greats.
Huge list. And another guy who you struggle to think of a bad fight with. I think you legitimately have the 2 most exciting guys ever fighting at the same time. It's like, oh my god. Because no one's ever going to forget Max Holloway trying to teach Brian Ortega how to strike with him, and then getting mad and slapping him when he doesn't do it, when he does it wrong. Like, unbelievable.
And it's going to be interesting to watch Max Holloway in this fight, obviously because it's a lightweight. Max has always been a career featherweight. Now, the last time Max Holloway went up to lightweight, he came across Dustin Poirier, main event of UFC 236. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have been rewatching that fight, I certainly have, to sort of try and get a gauge of how Max could do at this weight class. Now, Max unfortunately came up short in that match. What do you think were the big sort of intangibles that hurt Max there? Was it just simply that he was too small? Was Dustin just better on the night? Was there a weakness that Dustin was able to exploit that Justin might be able to? Like, what's your take on that fight in particular?
That fight is super close. That fight is really close, I think. Because early on, Max is kind of having trouble landing offense on the Philly shell of Dustin. And when Dustin pushes the pace, he'll throw a low kick when Max is like, and it starts slowing Max down. And then that helps open up Max to be hit a little bit more. And when Max gets hit, he gets walloped by full-on superpower Dustin Poirier punches. And Max doesn't go down, and Max recovers and wins some rounds back and almost wins the fight, I think. That said, those are the one thing I always remember in that fight in terms of game plans. Obviously, my favorite moment in that fight is Dustin realizing, like, how do I knock this guy down, and putting his hands on his hips at the end of I think the second round it was. Just going like, what is this guy? Like, that's always a really fan favorite moment for me. But seeing the low kick as Max is trying to circle away, because I remember I saw that this week and I went, uh-oh.
Because I don't think there's a better leg kicker in that division than Justin Gaethje.
Yeah, that's haunting. And when I saw that, I went, oh, that's not good.
Yeah. And it was something that Volkanovski used very well. I think especially the first and the third fights. But the first one in particular, Volkanovski had a lot of success just attacking Max low, limiting his movement. And I think it's I personally picked Volkanovski to win that fight. I didn't expect him to do it that convincingly.
That's a really good call. That's a really good call. That's almost better than the Julie call.
No, that was something I did sort of out of wild optimism.
It's fair.
I vowed to buy a T-shirt if she won. I had no faith in her whatsoever.
And then and it was like, you have to buy a T-shirt, but the only cost is your ACL.
It's one of my favorite icebreaker stories when I'm at a party.
Yeah, it's like, you ever tell you about the time it's like, that's wild. That's a wild story.
I'll put it this way. I watched the 297 the night after it happened, because I'm not staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, unfortunately, being British.
Don't blame you.
And obviously I was going to be invested in seeing if Raquel Pennington could get it done, but I did tell myself, no, Karl, just keep calm, just sit down, don't get up, don't shout at the telly or anything like that, just try and keep it calm.
I had this image of you in a straitjacket, all right, Karl, we're going to turn it back on. Don't hurt yourself. Oh, she won.
I think it was more like, in the episode of The Simpsons where Marge watches the plane disaster movie to try and get over a fear of flying, and she's sort of like in that sat position, but she's like miles away from the couch. That's kind of like what I was like.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good one. This fight's gonna be really good, though.
Very good.
Funny enough, we got off topic on this fight of all of them. For the next two, I understand, but this one, oh.
Like we did like Bo Nickal, like truckloads of detail, and we're just talking about The Simpsons with Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje.
So my favorite episode is Mr. Plow.
I do want to ask you something though in regards to Max Holloway, and it's the same thing that a lot of people have been talking about. There's a lot of photos of Max Holloway doing the rounds. He is looking a lot bulkier this time. And I think some people were critical of Max in the Dustin fight, that he maybe didn't try and bulk up, try and build his frame up to be a 155er in the way that people expected. He isn't doing that this time. I think he's going all in on this lightweight exploit. And I think that's part of the reason, to be honest, why... Because a lot of people were surprised that he took this fight over waiting to see Volkanovski versus Topuria. I think Max is in lightweight for the long haul.
I've been wanting this for a while, honestly, because he is a huge 45er, and I still feel like his style and skill set translates even better to lightweight. I just think Dustin is, Dustin's going to be that guy for him, probably. But this fight's really... him bulking up, I'm kind of curious, because I didn't think him not bulking up was a problem in the first fight, or in the first time he went to lightweight, because I was like, why would you want to mess with success, like your body type, your body stylings? And so I wasn't too worried about that. Seeing it here kind of going, or with Gaethje, it's like, okay. Are you worried about if he clinches up with you and throws a low kick? Or are you just wanting to be stronger in situations like that? Because with a Gaethje fight, there's a very big chance it gets dirty and nasty. Because Gaethje, especially with Max, who is a wild man, it will, Gaethje is pretty content standing on a napkin and throwing leather. Max will probably do the same thing, and that usually leads to a clinch at some point. So maybe he wants to get a little bulkier. Maybe he's worried about just being overpowered. One thing to consider is Max's actual punching power, because Max, he doesn't quite have pillow hands. He's a little more power than that. But he's not a one-shot killer. He's gonna kill you with 1,000
it's
cuts
volume.
or he's gonna catch you when you're mega off balance with the pin perfect shot. Volume and accuracy for him. And I wonder if he has, because Gaethje is going to keep going at you until you sting him. Does he have that oomph at lightweight to sting Gaethje and get him to back off? That's something I'm really curious about.
I'm very curious to see it as well. This is the fight that, in a lot of people's eyes, is garnering the most buzz. I actually saw a poll from Kevin Ioli's website, which they was asking people which fight they were most looking forward to out the entire card, and most people were saying Gaethje versus Holloway.
Yeah, this should have been main event. I gotta be honest. This was the main event, and if we just took the main event outright, I gotta be honest. This is just me. This was the main event for UFC 300, and we moved Yuri Prohaska up, and there was just one less fight on this card, I would be satisfied.
I personally think so as well. Because
this is... You got to go wild for 300. This is a wild fight. This is a weird fight that no one expects, and that's exactly what 300 kind of should be.
Yeah.
So
the 300 should be sort of a celebration of the UFC, and I think that's one of the few times where you can get away with having a little bit of fun. Dare I say, it's one of the times when I think a BMF title would be worthwhile. It's kind of MSG suited the BMF belt. UFC 300, in my opinion, suits it as well.
Yeah, I agree with this. I think it just makes sense to have this. I don't like the BMF belt. I don't think we both agree it's not a real belt. But I would have been perfectly okay with it headlining this fight, especially with these two guys. Like in those 8 years, we saw Max become the man. We had Gaethje debut and rock the world with like the most ridiculous fights. I don't have a problem with those guys closing the show. In fact, I'm hoping they change it at the last minute.
What? So you're suggesting Alex Pereira pulls a Jon Jones?
I'm suggesting that Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway, I think they should main event the same way that John Fitch technically main evented UFC 100.
Yeah, you're going to be talking about that in a lot more detail coming up later on the channel. So,
so
I've got the INC opinion poll here. So 66% of people are picking Gaethje to win this one, 34% for Max Holloway. Do you think that's a fair line?
66% Gaethje?
Yes.
Oh, that feels disrespectful a little bit. But then again, that's the thing the numbers don't show, is a lot of people are probably, I would say, maybe like 40% of that 60 that pick Gaethje are probably like, oh, this is really close, but I'm leaning towards Gaethje, like, kind of thing. It just, because so many people will slightly lean towards Gaethje, it makes it seem like it's kind of blown out.
I should point out the poll is not Gaethje has a 66% chance of winning. It's 66% of people favour Gaethje to beat Max.
It'd be closer to a 66 and 2/3 chance of winning.
A little bit of Steiner math there.
Yeah. If you take my 75% chance, if we was to go 1-on-1.
And I bring this up because I give Max Holloway a much bigger chance than a lot of other people. I think that he's prepped for 155 in the right way. Gaethje being 35, there's going to be some questions about whether he's the same fighter. And we're talking about a guy who he's fighting every 8 months or 9 months when it used to be sort of like 4 or 5. So there's some sort of activity issues that could be in play there. This is a hot take. Sometimes you go where you gut. I'm picking Max Holloway to win this fight.
Okay. I like it.
Because Gaethje is going to have to crack as well. One of the toughest chins in the sport.
I think 3 rounds to 2 Gaethje. I don't think he finishes Max. I don't think Max finishes Gaethje. And I think it's fight of the year.
That's a big ask.
I think it's fight of the year. I think this is... I don't see how this fight isn't, in my mind.
I'm a little bit wary of making those kind of predictions because I remember how hyped people were for Ngannou versus Lewis.
We should have known better in hindsight. We should have known better. But, I mean, it's not the worst fight I've ever seen, though.
Rose Carla?
Carla Rose. Yeah, because it's 5 rounds. It's 5 rounds of that. It's 10 more minutes. That's why it's worse.
Carla won me a lot of money that night, so I'm a little bit less critical of that.
For me, I remember having to watch it twice because I was like, who did I score it for? And when I got to the recap, I was like, just so drained and like out of it. I was like, what am I doing here? Like, why would you make me do this? Like, I had like an existential crisis.
It is time for us to talk about our core main event of the evening, and it's an historic one when it comes to the UFC. The first ever all-Chinese title fight. Zhang Weili takes on Yan Xiaonan here, so it's the champion versus the number 2 seed. Weili comes in as a minus 425 favourite. You can get Yan Xiaonan at plus 330. So, as mentioned before, historic moment for the UFC, the first all-Chinese title fight, and it's only the 3rd time where 2 fighters from the same nation have fought each other in a title match. So it's happened with 3 different nations beforehand. So Joe, a little bit of trivia to open up this part of the show. What are those 3 other nations where both fighters were from the same country?
It's got to be America and Brazil.
Yes.
Those are the 2 easy ones. I know it isn't England yet. And I don't believe it was like Russia. I feel like that's an easy, like a good guess, but did they technically say Ngannou was from France or Cameroon?
Cameroon.
For the Cyril Grown. Okay, so it isn't France then.
Shall I tell you?
Go
Poland.
Ahead. Oh, of course.
Joanna versus Carolina.
Yeah, funny enough. That's crazy. Yeah.
Which, ironically enough, another fight in the strawweight division. And I think this fight comes at an interesting time for the strawweight because for a long time, we've considered strawweight to be the marquee female division. I think probably since... Well, I use the tipping point as Joanna versus Claudia. That, for me, was the moment strawweight took over as the premier women's division. I think that place has been called into question, though. And there's a lot of different factors which have made me lean towards that way. I think flyweight has really got a lot better. We've sort of seen the sort of house that Chev built, as it were. We're seeing the new guard coming to the fore with Figueroa, Blanchfield, Tyler Santos, Alex Grasso, obviously. So I think that's really taken the shine off strawweight. We've seen a lot of people like Joanna and Rose have left the division. Karl is pregnant. We don't know if she's going to be coming back. So a lot of the biggest stars maybe dropped off the radar. And I don't think Weili has been as active a champion as what she maybe can be. And I think that slowed things down as well. We're just sort of, we're waiting for another big sort of breakout moment, and it just doesn't seem to be happening at strawweight at this moment in time.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to me. One thing that kind of hurts is like it's the activity of all of their fighters too.
Yeah,
you know, like Tatiana Suarez, I think she's staking to 115, so that's very up and coming and exciting, because that chick is like female Habib. Very good, and she's working on her striking and submission game as well. So, she's looking pretty good. But at the same time, it's like Yao Xiaonan. Should we struggle? Xiaonan, okay. Xiaonan. She hasn't fought since like.
It was May.
It wasn't May. Okay.
UFC 288.
Yeah, it was against Andrade and Jessica, not Cien Almas. I already wrestled last night. That's why I brought it up. And then like it was Amanda Lemos in August for Zhang Weili. So it's like, okay, activity. I think you have made a good point there. The activity just isn't there. Tatiana Suarez is always hurt, or else she would have been a champion. Like she would have been fighting for a title by now for sure. And you have a lot of people like Rose. Carla's gone. Rose, Joanna retired. Rose is at 125. Which might be a blessing in disguise, because do we really want to hear Thug Rose said 15 times? I don't know. That's a horrible DC call in a great fight. Thug Rose.
The moment was good. He milked it.
Yeah, real hard. That said, this fight, one thing that kind of hurts this division too is this fight isn't the most exciting on paper either. It's good because Zhang Weili is really fun, but it's not like whoa, like kind of eye attention grabbing. Neither was the Amanda Lemos one, but the Carlos Esparza one, I was like, I'm actually really interested in this fight.
I think the big intrigue that the Lemos fight had was we know how much of a fast starter Lemos is, who can crack, and Weili just took that away from her, like made it very wrestling heavy. Which we're not going to fault Weili for doing that. Weili's going to take the easiest path to victory, and if she knew she had a grappling advantage, then yeah, she's going to take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, I do like stand-up fights. I think Weili has a fantastic striking style. So from that point, it was disappointing. But you can't fault Weili for doing what's right for her.
Exactly. We say it all the time. GSP, greatest ever. He has, if you look at his skill set, he could be one of the most exciting guys of all time. But no, he's not going to fight that way. Why would he?
No. If he's fighting a striker, he's going to wrestle you. If he's fighting a wrestler, he's going to stand and trade.
Yeah. He's going to jab you 1,000 times in the face and break your eye. It's just kind of how it is. You take the path of least resistance. It's a concept in war, and it's a concept in fighting. You can't fault anybody for not everybody can be a Justin Gaethje, like you just got done talking about him. Like, not everybody can be like that. It's just we can't. I'm never going to fault somebody for being boring unless they're Holly Holm. That's deliberate. Like, she's doing it now just to piss me off. Um, but yeah, it's just kind of how it is. And I don't know if like Yao Shannon or say it again for me.
Just call her Yan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. I'm American and from the South. All right. If the name was in Spanish, I'd have us covered.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't think she has the style to like really bring that really good fight out of Zhang Weili, like in terms of exciting.
Yeah, I'm in the same bracket as well, unfortunately. But we will talk about each fighter in a bit more detail here. Try and look for some X's and O's. Try and think that if Yan was to win, what avenue she could use. But we'll start with the champion here, Zhang Weili, 24-3 record. Her last fight was a victory over Amanda Lemos, which was a dominant one. I think it was one of the biggest strike discrepancies. Definitely in the strawweight division history, maybe in title fight history as well. Very one-sided on her part, and she did it primarily through just taking Lemos down, wearing her a ground and pound. She did drop her late in the fifth round, but that was a very tired Lemos by that point. Yes, Weili has been quite inactive, and I think that maybe has played a part in strawweight stagnating a little bit. But I think as well, it's disappointing to see because I think the fan base really seems to like Weili. She seems like a nice enough person. She's very entertaining to watch. And if you look at her skill set, like if she keeps going the way she is, she could be sort of threatening Joanna as one of the best strawweights of all time. Yeah. But a 34-year-old who's fighting once every 9 or 10 months, I just get this fear she's going to sort of like age herself out of her prime, and that would be a real shame to see.
Yeah, that's something I kind of fear, because that was the thing I remembered, like when she was fighting like Rose. It was like, oh, Rose is like still like late 20s. Here's Zhang Weili, who's like early 30s, and it's like, okay, well, like she's like 32, I think, at the time, and I was like, okay, like that could play a factor into this, like the longevity of her career, and without the activity, it kind of makes it hard.
Yeah, actually, I was just doing a little bit of research there. I just prepped some notes because I was just thinking about this in my head. Is that another thing with strawweight has slowly become quite an old division. Like, look, I was looking at both of these fighters. They're both 34. Suarez, I think, is 34 as well. You got Lemos, who's 36. Werner's no spring chicken. Like, a lot of the girls near the top of this weight class are, dare I say, in terms of fight years, starting to maybe get on a little bit.
Yeah. I guess, like, not every prime can last, you know? Just kind of how it is. Like a prime of a division.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to proper screw up Luke Thomas's stats, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. One of them has to break the curse.
Well, Rocky did.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Volkanovski sadly memed his way into a loss.
Yeah. I remember, I actually pointed out that Raquel broke the curse, and people saying, women's bantamweight doesn't count.
That's actually funny. I mean, that's a funny
That's not a real division.
Like, okay, a featherweight I can understand, but bantamweight exists. That's pretty funny, though.
Yeah.
Anything to discredit Rocky, like our girl. So,
yeah.
I picked her though. At least I picked her to win. You didn't.
I didn't because I don't like picking for any of my favorites.
That's fair. That's fair. Actually, my first preview show ever, full one. You picked Johnny Walker to beat Paul Craig, and I went, that's weird. And then I was the one that looked dumb.
So we'll talk about Zhang Weili here. So what do you feel are the big sort of standouts when it comes to Weili? Because I think a lot of people have framed her sort of recent, especially sort of post the first Rose fight, a lot of people have said, well, she's only a wrestler now. Is there more to her game than just that?
Yeah, there's a lot more to her game than just that, because she fought Joanna right after, and they just went to war. Like, she still has a lot of power, especially in that division. She has a good amount of power. A multitude of strikes. She's kicking, she's elbowing, spinning back fist is how she knocked out Joanna. She'll oftentimes use like a pretty slick inside, like she'll slide up with like an inside low kick, and then she'll use it to step in and even get like a takedown or a trip off of it, which is very cool. She's trained with, oh man, my brain says Sumadarji, but that's not him. That's a fighter in the UFC, and it's not Lurdzilla. She trained really extensively for the first Joanna fight, and I know has done that since then as well, with like one of the best Muay Thai fighters on the planet. So like she's always like, and she also trained with Henry Cejudo, which is why her wrestling got so good. So she is pretty well versatile. She's like against Carla, she knew the fight was going to be a grapple fest with Carla. So she, trained to grapple with Carla and dominated Carla. Poor Carla. I mean, she can just kind of deal with almost anything that she feels comfortable dealing with. I think in that Joanna fight, I think she wanted to come out striking, though. And we saw what happens if she wants to strike. She can put you down.
But the first round was very wrestling heavy with the second fight.
Well, was it?
The first round was. And I think that Joanna
being... I get those fights mixed up a lot, admittingly.
Yeah, Joanna being on the back foot forced her to take more chances come the second, and that's when the back fist came in.
That's fair, because it was off a counter.
Yeah.
She face planted hard.
Yeah.
Poor Joanna.
Because I remember rewatching that fight when I did the Joanna retrospective. It's actually, in my opinion, one of the best videos I've done. So please watch it. Nobody did.
Just like the retro reviews, please.
Like, I feel so bad for us doing that Invicta one as well, because that's actually an okay card, but nobody's watching it.
I'm surprised the comments weren't as vitriolic as I expected, and kind of hoped we had some. It was like, this will be at least funny, like seeing angry man-childs get angry at me covering women's MMA.
I've got the feeling unless we do like the atomweight division when they introduce the atomweights to the UFC, I can't see us doing another Invicta card.
We got to keep the lights on somehow, guys. Come on, don't make us do an Invicta card. That is one of my favorite comments. Is like, I know you're trying to be a big time, like trying to get into the big times and grow your numbers, but this isn't it. Like, I mean, for me, they just made me laugh. Like, I wasn't even like offended because I wanted to do Invicta too, and you and me both did, and I wasn't even offended. I was just like so stunned, and I just made me laugh. It's still really funny to me.
So we'll talk about Yan Xiaonan here. So an 18-3 record. She's coming off that win over Jessica Andrade. Quite interesting as well that both of these girls have on their portfolio sort of like highlight reel finishes over Andrade, which I do find quite interesting. Dare I say, I think Yan's win was more impressive than Weili's. I know Weili got the win quicker, but that was sort of Andrade getting caught in the firefight and then getting caught. I felt that Yan's win was a lot more sort of, she knew what she was doing. Like hammering her with low kicks, getting Andrade to miss, and then Andrade getting careless, and then one-shotting her.
In the Andrade fight with Zhang Weili, it was also like an elbow to the back of the head that started that rocked her and then caused it. It was kind of one of those things where it's like, it's that gray area, kind of like Cyril Gahn elbowing people, hammer fisting people in the back of the head when they're trying to, clinch up or like avoid getting hit. It's that weird gray area, so it's not dirty or it's not like perfectly legal. It's that just awkward spot.
One of my favorite things about Cyril Gahn, before we just want to interrupt you because I don't want to bring this up. One of my favorite things about Cyril Gahn is people always make a big deal about how refined of a striker he is, and he is wonderful to watch by heavyweight standards. But the moment he has someone hurt, he goes into full-on Trevor Peek mode.
I knew you were going to bring up Trevor Peek because he fought last night. I was like, he just full-on Trevor Peek in it. That's a guy I want to see. I wish I kind of want to root for to like jump to the top just so I can be like, you want to see something really dumb? Watch this guy strike. Like, watch this guy. But he definitely has that. I think he had Lisa Simpson in his corner, his boxing coach, just gonna keep swinging.
But outside of the Andrade win, we've got Mackenzie Dern, Claudia Gadelha, Carolina, which was a one-sided fight. That was the fight where I think Carolina did she have some kind of eye poke or something? Because like she was really struggling for a long time in that fight.
If I remember right, her eye was like swollen shut by the end of it.
And then Angela Hill as well. So there's some notable names on Jan's record. Maybe not to the same caliber as Weili's, but I think she's worthy of this title fight. And I think one of the big things that stood out for me with Jan's most recent run is she had that loss against Carla. I think a lot of people hold that one against her, and I think big part of the reason why the odds and the polls are the way they are is because that's still fresh in a lot of fans' memory. But since then, she's training with Alpha Male. So she's training in America now. I thought her grappling defense seemed quite strong against Mackenzie Dern. Now, admittedly, a sort of wrestling-based style of Weili and the sort of jiu-jitsu-based style of Dern, two very different types of takedown. I admit that. But that's something to take as a positive. And I was also surprised by how big she looked when she fought Andrade. Like, Yan is a big, tall strawweight.
Mm-hmm. She looked tall and lean, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not sturdy lean, but like tight and firm, I guess, lean.
Got to be very careful when it comes to MMA.
I know. I don't know if I like that one. But she looked very lean and tall though, like a lot of length and muscle there, and did not make it easy for Andrade at all. She will have a good overhand right and a good guillotine coming into this fight. You're naturally predisposed to having that. But is she the tallest Team Alpha Male fighter?
No, Alpha Male, they had Malott.
Ah, okay.
How quickly we forgot about that guy.
Yeah. Tough luck, bud. Yeah, Malott was probably putting him to bed, like rocking him. Like, all right, Mr. Favor.
I love how you're framing Alpha Male as some kind of like nursery.
Yeah. I mean, TJ Dillashaw, dude, like he ruined that for everybody, because that made Cody Garbrandt their spokesperson. And I can't get that image out of my head of Cody Garbrandt ratting out everyone in Team Alpha Male to do steroids, which in my headcanon is so they can pretend to be big boys. I like Team Alpha Male. I have nothing against them at all. It's just I'm short too.
Do you think Yan has any sort of traits that you think could cause Weili problems?
The low kicks, I think, would be something, because Zhang Weili did not like the low kicks in the Joanna first fight and in the first Rose fight, where she didn't really do much. She hasn't shown me anything that she knows how to deal with them necessarily. That said, the risk of throwing low kicks is what if they get caught? Calf kicks, it's really hard to catch them to use wrestling to take that away. Like the calf kick, moving from the thigh to the calf has really taken away wrestlers and like jiu-jitsu guys' ability just to catch a leg and take you down. But the calf kick is something that is probably going to give Zhang Weili some trouble early on. I don't know if she has like the power to like really put it on Zhang Weili. I don't know if she has. I mean, honestly, the Carla fight, I'm kind of like in that. That Carla fight still feels fresh in my mind. And that's kind of where every time I think of an answer that Yan could have, I think of Zhang Weili just taking her down. So that's kind of on me as well for having trouble overlooking that. But at the same time, it is a fear I have.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as well. Like, I like to try and build up the idea of contenders maybe having a chance. I think Weili is going to make this very grappling heavy. She's going to take the most risk-adverse option. And I can see her getting Yan down and sort of ground and pound sort of second rounder, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think... I want to know how much work she has off her back. You know, like how much work has she put in off her back to be able to like to deal with someone taking you down? Because it's one thing to deal with, you know, going in the wrestling room and like having and working on your wrestling all day and night. I also think you have to work on what happens if you mess up. Like what happens if you get taken down? Like, what are your plans of attack now? Are you trying to submit him off your back? Are you trying to sweep him? Are you trying to stand up? And I feel like that's something a lot of times gets overlooked when someone works on their wrestling going into a fight. They only care about preventing the takedown, but realistically speaking, you can't prevent them all.
I was looking at the opinion polls that we posted on the main channel here, and at the moment, people are picking. I will rephrase that actually. The majority of fans are picking Weili to win this one, as you'd expect, but it's a 93% of people are leaning that way. So that's only 7% of people who are picking Yan between the two, which makes it one of the most one-sided polls that we've done. Ironically enough, the record holder is Amanda Lemos. 4% of people picked her to beat Weili at UFC 292.
Before that, it was Lauren Murphy.
Yes, I think Lauren Murphy had 5%, I think.
And Talia Santos, I know, was up there too.
Santos, I think, had about 8%.
I remember it was single digits.
Yeah. And of course, the biggest upset in terms of the polls was the 6% of people who picked Julie.
Mm-hmm. Haunting.
I
told you, folks, he was going to find a way to bring it up. I'm just kidding.
It's UFC 200. I'm going to have to.
Oh yeah, UFC 200. I already know. Like when I cover that on the retro review, I'm going to talk about how great, like Amanda Nunes, like this is like her crowning moment, and I can just see, like in the background, like you're fading it in, like her tapping out to like Juliana.
Honestly, I work in sort of finance, and if I see the numbers 269 together, I just start smiling to myself.
Fun fact, folks, I recently talked about how in a retro review that I brought up Amanda Nunes, and I said Amanda, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Amanda Nunes, and in a blink and you miss it moment, like if you watch it, there is no cut, like in what I say, but me who recorded it, I caught it. Karl cuts out me saying It's so funny. It is so funny to me. It's like one of those things that's only funny to you and me because we're the only ones who know.
And there's me with the goofy meme. I'll do it again.
It was so funny to me.
Do you think 7% is right when it comes to Jan's chances of winning this one, or do you think maybe people are being a little bit too harsh?
I think that sounds about right to me. In terms of like how fan perception is, yes, that sounds accurate to me. Like, it's probably a little too harsh, but I think like a realistic percentage, or like the realistic odds of her winning are probably like maybe like 4-1, 5-1.
Yeah, I'd sort of
20-25%.
I'd sort of go 10 to 15 range. I think when you go into single digits, maybe being a bit too harsh. But then again, I thought that it was too harsh for Lemos to have 4%, and obviously that fight played out the way it did.
I thought that was a little crazy because I was like, what if like she comes out early, she's big, strong, put them punches down. You never know. But it is going to be interesting to see. Assuming Weili wins this fight, it's going to be interesting to see which way the UFC go with her, because we don't know if Suarez is coming back. She's had like another injury. Yeah. I think it will be her if she's fit, but if not, like you're looking at the Andrade versus Marina winner, which it's a bit of a tough sell on both fronts because obviously Weili beat Andrade the way she did, or it's Werner, who I don't see that being an attractive fight for the UFC. I don't based on the way that Werner fights. Yeah, I think they're probably going to go Werner unless Suarez recovers in time. And I don't. Here's a hot take. I don't think women's strawweight's getting defended again this year.
That's my fear. That's my fear, big time.
Yeah, I have a really big fear of that. Mostly because of the lack of contenders at this point, though. But I don't know. I think this division. I don't think it's necessarily time to be like bring out your dead, like call it. You know, I don't think it's in that much trouble. but it's definitely something to keep an eye on if I was the UFC. Like, because I think that's also part of their job is to cultivate divisions
Yes.
and make sure they get the proper care they need. And this is a division that could use a little bit of that, I think, coming up
Because
soon.
we've seen what's happened with bantamweight. Because a lot of people had the warnings about bantamweight 3 years, 4 years ago. And it's only now that the UFC are panicking and saying we need to do something to save this weight class. Like, I was saying, like, hey, you need to get some girls signed straight away.
Yeah, they like. I mean, it's kind of hard to like fix a division when the greatest of all time is finishing everybody in that division, right, Carl? You agree with me there, right?
We talked about the girl who's just released her autobiography, aren't we?
Oh no, I thought we're talking about Kayla Harrison.
I've actually bought Ronda's autobiography. I might do a review of it on the Patreon.
That'd be really fun. I'd watch that. I'd watch that in a heartbeat. That sounds funny. Yeah.
Main event time, and we are going to the light heavyweight division, and it is Alex Pereira who is making the first defense of his title, and he's going to be taking on a guy who technically never actually lost the belt, Jamahal Hill. So Alex Pereira is a slight favourite for this one. I think he's about -140. You can get Jamahal Hill at +120. The opinion polls, though, they are much more one-sided towards Pereira. 73% of people are picking him to win this match. Now, we need to start with the elephant in the room when it comes to this fight. All the reports were that this was planned to be the main event of UFC 301, which makes sense. Pereira, a Brazilian, defending his title in Brazil. But the UFC had a lot of high-profile issues trying to book a main event for this one. There were rumours that it was going to be Conor versus Chandler, Jon Jones versus Stipe was rumoured for a little bit. I think they teased the idea of Aspinall versus Pereira. Leon Edwards was approached and he went to every single Dagestani wrestler that he could to try and contact them. Obviously, Ramadan put pay to that. Poor Bilal Muhammad was campaigning saying, please pick me. For the love of God, like just it's like Donkey in Shrek when he's saying, does anyone want to join me? And Shrek's intentionally ignoring him. That's kind of how it felt.
Me just jumping in the background.
So they've settled on this match. First thing first, Joe. Is this a worthy UFC 300 main event?
No, not really. And here's why. I think in terms of fun, this could be this could be a pretty good fight actually. But it really feels like we're just kind of giving like Alex Pereira like a lot. Like he's kind of coming across Roman Reignsy to me. In that sense, like this is a guy who, realistically speaking, probably couldn't defend a double leg from the guy opening the main card. And and like Jamahal Hill, like I think a lot of people have kind of like cooled off on him because he's been out for so long. It's kind of like really hurt things. And it's at 205, which historically, while it's gotten a little bit better, it hasn't like blown up and become like a great division again. And I think that's kind of hurting this.
And I think as well, I don't think that, and this is just my own personal opinion, and I want to stress this. I think for the headliner of a marquee card, you've got to have somebody in there who feels like a star. Like Brock Lesnar headlining UFC 100. Even though there's like question marks, Brock coming in from the WWE, so being fast tracked to the belt, he felt like a star because he carried that big audience with him. And Frank Mir fight was a rematch, Brock trying to revenge his only loss. Jones versus DC, which was supposed to headline UFC 200, rematch from a sort of ill-tempered bout. John technically didn't lose the belt, he got stripped of it, he wants to try and get it back, so there was a storyline to it. This doesn't really have that.
No, not
I think
really.
It's a solid fight, but it's not UFC 300 special.
Yeah, that's kind of my gripe with it too. Like, also, I think a lot of us just kind of can see, we can just kind of tell that this was rushed. for a card that Dana White has been saying is like, oh, like we have it perfectly planned out, like we meticulously planned. It's gonna like we could put a documentary together based on how much work and how awesome of a job we did for this card. And it's like, dude, I'd rather have Gaethje and Holloway as the main event than this, because like this fight just feels so manufactured is the wrong word, but so synthetic in the sense of like crap. We wasted too much time on these Apex cards to get people for 300. Like, what do we do? Like, just steal a pay-per-view from another card? I don't care.
So we'll start by talking about our 9-2 light heavyweight champion, Alex Pereira here. And I don't know about you. Now, I usually go against the grain of a lot of fans when it comes to some of my opinions here. And if I say things which people disagree with, I do apologise, because it's not my intention. I think it's great thing is it's a free country. We can talk about and interpret things in each way that we can. I just don't get the Alex Pereira love. I'll rephrase that. I understand why people like him. It's the level of fandom that I think he has.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is. It's so like, you know how you have an issue with Valentina because you feel like her fans sort of simp over her.
Well,
I feel like
we have fans in our comments. Oh no, good. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I feel like Alex Pereira is very similar. It's the level of obsessiveness over the guy. Like when they were really having to go over his ex-girlfriend because they appeared to break up, and then she got a lot of venom from those people, which I felt was incredibly harsh. And I think it's affected how a lot of fans see him as a fighter as well. Because like I've seen people saying that if Alex Pereira fought Daniel Cormier, that Pereira would win. And I'm thinking like, well, first off, DC is like a world-class wrestler exploiting this weakness that he has. And we've also seen him flatlined by Israel Adesanya just over a year ago. And you're trying to paint him as this kind of like flawless deity, which no fighter is unbeatable. And I just think that the fan base there is just a little bit too weird for my liking. But also as well, I think for me, if you're going to be fighting at a title level, you need to answer every question about your game. You need to answer whether or not you've got good cardio, good striking, good wrestling, that sort of thing. We've got a guy who has been fast-tracked to the top of 2 weight classes, and yet there are still massive questions about his wrestling. He has not fought a wrestler. And I just can't...
It's weird.
I can't help but get this feeling that if Alex Pereira had to navigate his career the way that any other prospect was, that's probably Alex Pereira's fans now trying to
I think they got me. Who the hell could it be? Oh, funny enough, shout out to Frankenfoot.
Check it out.
Yeah, he it was him texting me.
Yeah. Was he criticizing us for criticizing Alex Pereira?
Probably.
No. Actually,
that'd be Anthony, my best friend and roommate. Like he's become an Alex Pereira fan.
Yeah. And if you do like Alex Pereira, you're entitled to your own opinion. Like, and I understand he is an entertaining fighter. I can understand why people like him. I just feel like if he wasn't given the sort of storyline with Izzy, and he wasn't given like the fast track with like the Sean Strickland match, can you see him beating Derek Brunson? Can you see him beating Marvin Vettori? I don't. Like, he has become a 2-weight UFC champion without fighting a single wrestler. And as somebody who favours meritocracy, it's just something that knocks me.
I think a way to describe like what we're trying to get at here is we're not critiquing the fan base. We're not critiquing the fighter. We're just openly questioning this concept that like he's suddenly like the baddest guy on the planet. Like what? Well, hold on. Like we're questioning how he didn't earn this stuff through meritocracy. He earned it from storylines, and the closest thing to a wrestler he fought, he lost, but they gave him the decision, in my opinion, with the Yan fight. Like
I thought Yan won that fight.
Yeah, I thought Yan won that fight. I thought it was pretty clear. And I don't dislike him. I'm kind of neutral to him. I don't dislike Pereira. I don't dislike the fans. I don't think either one of us are saying that, obviously. But it's like I don't dislike Valentina fans. Like I just, just a clown. And Valentina, I do hate though. Kidding. Couldn't help it. Devil on my shoulder told me to say it. It's more that we're just kind of questioning things. Like we just kind of find it a little odd in this situation, you know. It's also like kind of a public lamenting of the loss of meritocracy in the UFC, in a sense, and he's kind of like the poster boy for that, sadly, you know.
Yeah,
like he's a prime example of meritocracy's gone.
Like, that doesn't take away what he did when he was given those opportunities, because he won those fights. I will give him credit for that. It's just it's like when Conor was coming up through the ranks, there were people calling him out because he wasn't fighting wrestlers.
Yeah,
this is a similar situation.
It'd be unfair of me, massive Conor hater, to critique Conor for that and not critique a guy I'm neutral towards. Is a kind of a thing I also look at. Like I said it earlier, my best friend, guy who I've been best friends with this guy, Jesus, 25 years in September or August. You know, wild. Our big anniversary, our big 25. Ooh. But no, like he's become like a really big Alex Pereira fan, and I'm kind of neutral to him, but he, like, a lot of it, like, his striking is so entrancing. Like, it's a real pleasure to watch him strike. And how stone faced he is and terrifying he is kind of, you know, it's intriguing, you know. So we totally get like why people are fans of him, but it is just like he went from like being kind of like Roman Reigns to suddenly he has like Habib and Conor levels of fandom, like of how hardcore their fan group is, and we're just kind of like questioning it. I think that's probably the way to say it, because I'm saying that now because I'm about to get really harsh on this guy. He sucks. This guy is terrible. Oh no, I'm kidding. He's very good, but I don't know if he's 2-belt champion like worthy, you know.
When that big question about his game hasn't been answered yet.
Yeah, like it's weird, because I think he would have caught Brunson. There's no way he's catching Vettori like that. Like, in my brain, Vettori would have just taken him down and Vettori'd him, you know. The Kelvin Gastelum that fought Adesanya, who also had a decent little fast track, but Adesanya did fight tough competition once he got close, to his credit. Yeah. The Kelvin Gastelum that fought Adesanya would run through Alex Pereira at middleweight. DC, I think, would run through Alex Pereira. Like, I don't think, just no chance of that. And so it's weird. Like, it's just kind of weird that him in these spots like this. And it's also even weirder when people who are much more well-rounded than him are just going, no, I'm going to strike with him.
And the worst, and I think the big thing is the question about Alex Pereira isn't going to be answered with this fight either, because someone pointed out at the start, in his UFC career, Jamahal Hill has never attempted a takedown. Yeah.
Jamahal Hill apparently has been saying, like, no, this fight's gonna be really easy, and everyone, I guess, in like interviews has assumed, oh, you're just gonna take him down, and he goes, no, I'm gonna strike with him. I'm gonna make it uncomfortable for him, and I'm gonna knock him out on the feet. And whenever I heard that, I went, well, there's my prediction. You know, like, because Jiri was the same way, and then we have worse, like Ankalaev's now saying stuff like that, like, oh, I'm not strike with Pereira. Like, why are you doing this? Why?
So we will talk about Jamahal Hill here, because he was, whether a lot of people like to embrace this or not, he was the former light heavyweight champion. He dominated Glover Teixeira in his last fight, UFC 283. That's an interesting intangible here, because Glover's been doing a lot of work with Pereira. Maybe might give a little bit of insight, but I think there's a lot of people who they refuse to acknowledge how good Jamahal Hill is. And I don't know if that's because he kind of fell into a title match with Glover, or whether he's rubbed people the wrong way with a lot of his comments online. But there's a lot of people thinking that this fight is going to be a sort of like a one-sided beatdown for Pereira. And I think they're ignoring Jamahal Hill is very good.
He's good. He's lanky. He's smart on the feet. He has a layered striking game, like so he attacks with like a little bit of everything, which is good. I think he's just kind of unlikable, like between legal issues, like of like fist fighting his brother, or like by all accounts sucker punching his brother first too, and like what he says online. I think he's just kind of a little unlikable, which kind of helps discredit that. I think you're onto something there. But what he did against Glover was pretty impressive. So, retired Glover,
Yeah, I think Glover was going to retire, win or lose.
Same.
Yeah.
Which would have been even more chaos for that division. Because that fight only got made because Ankalaev and Yan apparently was so offensive to Dana White that he walked out and made a new title fight. Yeah. And that fight was a draw.
I mean, weird. The logic is you run that fight back, but Dana was so unhappy with the main event that he said a completely different match.
So weird. That fight isn't even bad. Like, that fight is fine. Like, I've watched worse fights every other weekend on the Apex. Like, why isn't he walking out here? Like, come on. Like,
I don't think Dana goes to the Apex anymore, to be honest.
I don't even think he's been to Vegas in a long time.
Because if you notice when they do the stare downs for like the weigh-ins, it's always Sean Shelby.
Yeah, it's him instead, and he looks so happy to be there. I don't know what he looks way more. He looks too excited. For a guy who has to watch an Apex card. It's weird. Once again, I want his job.
Yeah. You would have had it if you didn't have a go at Delete.
5 Bengal Tigers versus Delete, I thought would have like really helped out with. Also, congratulations. Actually, like no jokes aside, I think they just had their kid.
Yes, a few months ago.
So congratulations to them. I thought it was recently. Maybe it's recently that she's coming back, like working towards coming back. That's why I heard it. But yeah, congrats to their kid. Yeah, obviously.
One thing I have noticed when it comes to Jamahal Hill, though, is he is a southpaw. Mm-hmm. And from the parts of Pereira's sort of portfolio that I've watched, because I've watched a few of his kickboxing matches as well, he does seem to have problems with southpaws. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's maybe a little bit of an X factor that Jamahal might sort of try and utilize, find some success with?
I could see it. I wonder, because Jamahal Hill also fights long, like really long. So I can't think of anyone like hard low kicking him. And that's a thing with Pereira. Like, Pereira, in my opinion, is pound for pound the hardest hitter I've ever seen in the sport. When he hits Sean Strickland with that left hook, in my head, Sean Strickland gets off the ground and flies into the cage. But his low kicks are nasty, and they look so painful to throw. Like, there's no turning of the hips. He just kind of like throws his leg upward like that, and that sounds just painful to me. It sounds like my knee is just going to get ripped to shreds just thinking about that kick.
And he's coming up against a guy who recently had surgery on his leg.
ankle and knee, I think. And it's so I wonder how like those kicks are going to work against Jamahal Hill. Jamahal Hill's probably going to try and fight long here because he doesn't want to be in left hook range. But one thing interesting I've always noticed, it is kind of funny that Pereira has a little, like, he slows down against southpaws for sure. But I've noticed in like boxing that the lead hand usually determines, like in MMA as well, the lead hands in these southpaw orthodox matchups, whoever is best at manipulating the lead hand usually wins the fight. Because like Manny Pacquiao was like the king of like grabbing like Ricky Hatton's hand and then moving it out of the way and then like left straight, Not to bring that up because I know Ricky Hatton's your boy, big Ricky Hatton fan too. Don't worry.
Yeah, proper old-fashioned workhorse fighter. A little bit
and
dirty, but
a little bit. Yeah. Him and Mickey Ward are fun style listings of that old school grit and grind.
Like, I remember when Hatton fought Kostya, and the pub was absolutely bouncing.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Because no one thought Hatton would win that fight.
I remember a lot of people in my family picking Hatton to beat Floyd. And then, sadly, people were like, oh, I guess Hatton showed us Floyd can punch. It's like, oh, great. But Hatton was a lot of fun.
So, which way are you leaning with this one, Joe?
Jamahal Hill is saying that he wants to strike with Alex Pereira, and that to me just goes, oh, you've lost. Like, kind of as bad as that sounds. You never want to count a guy out like 100%, and I'm not. I just think it's like an 80% chance Alex Pereira just levels Jamahal Hill here, and I think Hill can make him work, and maybe he decides to shoot a takedown, and he's playing us all for fools. And if he does that, he has a really good chance of winning. But despite the length and despite the southpaw, I got to pick Alex Pereira here. I just think he's just probably, in terms of technique, he's probably the best striker in the world still.
I think that the combination of injuries, I think that's something that I sort of err on the side of caution when it comes to Jamahal Hill. I'll put it this way. If Jamahal Hill was 100% fit, I would be hammering that line, because I think there's a lot of value for money in him winning this fight, because I think a lot of people are underestimating how good he actually is. But with the injuries, especially with it being a leg injury against a guy that we know is a hard kicker, you've got to play it safe and go with Pereira. One thing I will say, though, to sort of like wrap up this sort of segment of the show, though, is the likelihood is Ankalaev is going to be fighting the winner of this one.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just a foregone conclusion that the winner of this one's losing the belt in the next fight?
If Ankalaev decides to wrestle, yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think if he decides to stand up with Pereira and Pereira wins this fight, are we just giving this guy wins now? Like, what's going on? Like, I will never understand that. They say fear is the mind killer. I watched Dune 2 recently. Fear is the mind. It's really good for anyone that hasn't seen it. It's really good. Fear is the mind killer. I argue this. Ego to stand and strike with Alex Pereira is the real killer. Like, just take him down. He doesn't know what he's doing there. It's as easy as ripping the floaties off of someone and throwing him in the deep end. Like, I don't know how much work Glover can put in to take away from Ankalaev's like decades of wrestling. Yeah, it's only so much you can learn.
And that has been the UFC 300 preview show. It's been an absolute pleasure to be talking to you, Joe, about everything relating to this card. Fingers crossed it lives up to the hype, because I know a lot of people thought UFC 200 had a lot of fanfare and a combination of different things and maybe didn't live up to people's expectations. Fingers crossed that we don't get a repeat of that when it comes to 300. I hope, though, that you can stay tuned to the channel, though. We've got plenty of content coming up here on INC Live. Joe's post-fight reaction for Allen versus Curtis 2 should be online by now. And also, Joe, in the next few weeks, we're going to be getting ourselves another retro review. Now, normally we put out a poll asking people for which card they want to vote for. With it being UFC 300, though, we thought we would take matters into our own hands and do our own anniversary cards. So, Joe, give people a little bit of a taster of what they can expect.
To give the proper tasting for this card and to perfectly tantalize, I think you would need something a little bit stronger than a mineral water. I'm thinking a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light, because Bud Light won't pay me nothing. And we're gonna go to Las Vegas, Mandalay Bay, and we're gonna go and rip horseshoes out of people's asses. It's awkward, and beat people over the head with it, because we're talking about UFC 100, which has one of the most shocking main events in UFC history. If you know, you know. It has a weird main event, and technically this fight went on last, but I'll talk about it in detail. I won't spoil it here.
Certainly so, and it's one that I'm really looking forward to. I'm actually splicing it all together right now. For March, not March I should say, that was last week. That was when we did the Invicta card that nobody watched.
Watch it, it was funny. It was good.
Yeah. The only time you'll ever see a Sally Krumdiak fight on this channel.
Someone's going to Patreon request another one, aren't they?
And it's a good thing you mentioned Patreon requests, because for May, obviously we have 2 pay-per-views there. Now, we have admittedly sort of put the Patreon requests on the back burner, and we thought, you know what, it's not fair to those people who subscribe to the channel. So May's retro reviews are going to be Patreon requests. So we've got 3 of them, which are all in the works right now. We'll try our best to get at least 2 of them out there. So shall we give people a little bit of a clue of what these are, Joe? Shall we give them away, or shall we leave it for the public's imagination? 3 good cards, though.
One of them has my favorite fight of all time on it, and I got to freak out and cover that. Another one has probably Jon Jones' best fight on it. And the other one, actually, it's got a lot of names. Probably the most hidden hammers I can put on one card. I think that's easy enough, fair enough to say.
Yeah. So it's something that we are looking forward to give to the fan base. If you want to get involved with the channel in some capacity, be it as an editor or as a writer, then please get in touch with me on Twitter. You can also contact us on Instagram at It's Not Cagefighting, patreon.com/It's Not Cagefighting if you want to support the channel, including our sort of side series, which is INC Uncaged. For now, though, this has been UFC 300. My name has been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Neal. We'll be back in 3 weeks' time as we cover UFC 301, Jose Aldo's return, as well as the eagerly anticipated, in inverted commas, Alexander Pantoja versus Steve Erceg fight. This is the INC. Thank you so much for watching.